Good morning.
Morning, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
Okay, share ko lang screen for the formative assessment this week.
Kasama na doon yung mga pansariling yun ay so, yung malit na isip ng may tanda, yung mga alamat, yung mga may kwento, yun ay mga
Experimental, non-experimental designs. So, formative assessment 1, it's also you're selecting a word bank, words from the word bank, and it can be used only once. So identify the type of sampling most closely associated with the supplied definition. And then another formative assessment. Okay, identify the appropriate sequence when testing a hypothesis, in which you assign the number 1 for the first step and first step in the process, and number 5 for the last step in the sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 la. So that's why points is only for 5. So appropriate sequence when testing hypothesis. So you may read the module for this, and we have a class activity for next class activity. So you may choose experimental study online. So it should be physical therapy related studies, then assess for validity of the study using the Pedro scale. So we'll be discussing Pedro scale later. So we have, I provide you a link for the Pedro scale and guidelines to use the Pedro scale. So copy the Pedro scale on a Word document, provide a copy of the article. So if you want it for a group activity, okay, lagi yapon. So let's move to our discussion. Okay, wait. So ano, okay la ka mo?
Medyo okay, ma'am.
Medyo okay, kaya diri ngayon okay. Wala naman da ka mo mga activities nga iba or mga sa tiyo kuan ORS nga Reva.
Next
ano
face
to?
to face pa.
Next ano?
Next nga face to face.
Next face to face pa. Okay. Sige. So our topic for this week, experimental non-experimental design or research design. So sige. Let's start. So the outline, we'll be discussing the subjects, research subjects and sampling, experimental designs, experimental controls, and hypothesis testing. So we start with the research subjects and sampling. So we define population as a group to which the results of research are intended to be generalized. So if you have an intended population for your research, you get a sample size of it. So not all population, natanan nga population in that certain area, himuon nga sample. So sample is a subset of elements drawn from the population. So you use a sample to draw conclusion or to make estimates about the larger population. So there is a calculation for sample size. Okay, so diri ka lang magmamanhin mo completing sample size. Otherwise, unless it is a qualitative. So sample size must be sufficient that it should be a representative of a population, a group of population, yung intended group of population. So population, a sample is you just draw from the population of intended population so that you can draw a conclusion when you do a research. So dapat sufficient enough ang sample size nimo to kumbaga to represent the population or your intended population para ma-generalize nimo. Okay? So sample size calculation na mention ko, it should be used to make sure you have a correct sample size. Okay? This is frequently used term in statistics and market research, and one that is inevitable comes up whenever you're surveying a large population of respondents. So, depende nimo research questions, depende nimo conditions nga imo, population nga imo intended or intention nimo nga. So, depende. Kung if it is a rare population, magpupuri ka, paghimong sample size. So, dapat magpa-calculate ka ng sample size para sufficient it imo sample. Kasi nakikita gapit at validity of the study. So, it is a random sample of individual represents the population as a whole. So, bagahin, randomly nakuha ka in a certain population. So, sampling is a process used in a statistical analysis in which a predetermined number of observations are taken from the larger population. So it depends on the type of analysis being performed. So sampling is nagkukuha kahin sample or nagkukuha kahin ng mga a group of people in that population, that is sampling, para magamit mo for research. So sampling error happens if there is a difference between a population parameter and sample statistic used to estimate it. So kung may ka sampling error, it may not be, any mo research will not be valid. So dapat, it should be calculated, nga imo sample should be sufficient enough to generalize your data or generalize the outcome of your research to the larger population. So this sampling error occurs when a sample used in the study is not representative of the whole population. Nagkulang ka. Okay, so may nag-drop out during the research. So it could happen, sampling error. So it occurs when a researcher does not understand who they should survey or ang tigagamiton nga sample size, ano kadamon niya sample size. So to make sure nga sufficient mo sample size, pa-sample size calculate ka. Okay? So sampling error, there are types, selection bias, okay. But of course, when individuals or groups in a study differ systematically from the population of interest. So nag-selection ka lahin, imo la karuyag. So there's a bias. Kung ano imo karuyag lang na pumili ka la, it could occur an sampling error. Or random sampling error occurs when the analyst does not select a sample that represents the entire population of data. Okay, naggamit ka random sampling, kinuha ka ito dida certain subsets of in the population, kumuha ka iba-iba nga klase nga tao. Pero anong ging kuha, waray ka nagunahuna an ira characteristics. So sakto ba ito mga characteristics nga mo ging kuha an na-apply ba ito imo research? So it could result to sampling error. So okay, sufficient animo samples, random sampling ka, pero dili asya nimo nakuha nga characteristic ng mga tao. So that could occur an sampling error. So we have sampling with replacement and sampling without replacement. So according ito na intindihan, when you say sampling with replacement, you select a group of people in a population and then gimbalik mo laliwat itera to that population and then second naliwat nimo nga pag-select. So bagalang kumuha ka, tapos balik mo naliwat dito, tapos random naliwat nimo, ukay mo na lahat ng mga tao, then kuha ka naliwat. Okay, sampling without replacement, it is the opposite. Only one chance lang to be selected in a sample. So meaning, sampling with replacement, kung ako nakuha nimo at the first nimo nga selection, nakuha mo ako sa a participant, tapos pagbalik mo ako dito nito nga grupo again, waray mo kakuha hani kaduha nga research aw selection, pero okay lagi hapon. Kumbaga pwede mahinabo nga diri ka makuha. Pero ang sampling without replacement, one chance lang. So kung napuloan imo aw singo da 50 katawo an imo nakuha as a sample and then nag-random select ka lang kay kanang lamulain 30. Okay, so 30 katawo. Only one chance lang kasi without replacement, only one chance na pwede siya makuha or diri. So there's a chances na diri siya makukuha, there's a chance liwat na pwede siya makuha. Okay, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. When you say probability, this is a random selection. So there is every member of the population made a chance na ma-select hiya as a participants or a sample. So this is a free unbiased. When you say non-probability sampling, non-random selection, ging kukuha good, ging specific good tiya pagkuha. If this happens, non-probability sampling happens when the cases or conditions are very rare. So kung rare ni mo condition, so wala ni mo choice, di ka mag-random selection. Imo na laya kukuhaon, kaya wari ka naman iba nga makukuhaan nga condition. Ito lasing on a certain population, 500 may da sugad nga condition. So kulang kalagiha. So kailangan gumuha kan iba nga mga places or areas nga may dahito sugad nga condition. So that is the difference, okay? Now under probability sampling, we have simple random, systematic, stratified random, and cluster sampling. So I guess you know this already. So when you say simple random sampling, it is a computer-generated or table. Yan ako most legit ka computer-generator. Or pwede man ito mano-mano lang. You provide a numbers for each person in a population. May maging kuha. Okay, so simple random sampling is that you choose. So in a group of population, from here and 3 groups, na-choose ka la randomly kung ano tim kukuhaon. This is a simple and efficient method of sampling. But kumbaga luck of the draw la, may luck lang nga pwede ka makuha or diri. Kumbaga gindu-draw lot mo lang hiya, okay? But the problem here is that if you see iba-iba't color, so pwede iba-iba, diri nga tanan nga characteristic makuha mo. So singon ta didi, nakuha mo duha nga the same characteristic, usalat mayda din usa nga ibalat ng color, iba liwat adi liwat ang baga usala liwat. So diri hiya sometimes diri hiya representative of a population. Nung diri nga tanan nga characteristic aada. Okay, diri sakto an ira pagkakuha. Kasi most of this example, duha it parehas. So diri hiya balancing. Okay? So this is the steps to conduct simple random sampling. So you make a list, assign sequential number, choose a sample size, convert yung sample size, ingon ta. You make a list, I want 100. Okay, kung di na ko nga tungod, palula ko, okay, 100 people. So assign mo 100 people, mga taga mo yan number, and then you choose a sample size, so kailangan mo lang 30 katawo, okay? 30 katawo, okay, so okay na ito. 30 katawo. Na depende kasi ito kung ano mo research question. Kasi if your research question or just a survey questionnaire, it needed damo nga population. Okay, so dapat magpa-sample size calculate ka mo. And then, you choose a sample size yung 30 hitong out of 100, tapos imo like to draw a number, and it will be table generated, or ikaw na lang mismo magdodraw, and then you have that sample. Simple lang. Systematic sampling is subjects are selected by taking the 9th, kung kapiraba. Imo baga depende hit imo kung if you have, for instance, in this sample, so every third it iya, so every third nga person or every third amot ya kukuhaon. So may interval based on the size of population, dependehan imo sample size 100, so every third amot yung papanuhaon. Simple lagi hapiya, simple lagi, pero systematic hiya. Kasi may daniya sinising every third, every fourth, every fifth, every sixth. Okay, depende. Okay. So, stratified random sampling liwat is also known as proportional or quota random sampling. So, stratified means you have the strata or subgroups. And the good of this sample size or random sampling, and the advantage of this is pwede mo hiya ma-assure nga imo sample will be representative of the population. So what happened is depending on the characteristic of imo characteristic naging kukuha sa sample. So in 100 na population, 100 people in one population, 100 people ang kuha nimo, gin-select mo ito dependehan imo characteristic. So kailangan nimo mahusay, kailangan nimo mabusag, o kailangan nimo sa dito. So may da grupo nga maghusay, may da maghusang magraksot, may da maghusang magbusag, may da grupo nga maitom. So ngata nito may strata, may groups ka, and then makuha ka taga group. Usa nga So ginggrupo mo ito, pwede naman sisig mo hinira maghusay, hinira ay pagsiring. So may mo hiton list lang nga inihiray grupo kun hira dependehan imo information na kuha ha or characteristic iti mo research. So dependehan information na kuha mo taga hito nga tawo. So pwede ka ni survey ka. Tas ini nga pagkita mo ni answer ha survey amo tim kukuhaon ni hiya nga representative or a representative of this population. So nakuha mo hiya and then ira-random sampling mo hira. So igugrupo mo hira then random sampling within that group. So ito nga group pero tam kukuhaon. So pagahiya representative of all the kumbaga in a generalized population kasi depende lang tani mo research. Okay, this is how to conduct a stratified random sampling. Anyway, minasa ko. Ano to? Okay. Okay. So define the target, recognize the stratification variable. So kung ano ting gusto nga grupo or ano ting mga sinsing nga characteristic ito sa nga sample or sa nga subject or sa nga participant. And create the sample, then evaluate the sample, and then define the elements of per stratum. So when you say create a sample, pwede in a population of 1,000, kuha mo lang 100. And then evaluate that 100 per people. Then assign them to groups, whatever characteristics imo ging kukuha. And then kuha hito nga per group yung pera ka sample size. Pera la ito. So in a group of 100, singon taw you have 5 characteristics. So 5 characteristics, so nagba 20-20 ra. So in each group may 20, then makuha kalahin singon ta 5. Wayaw kulang 5. So napulo taga o 15 taga usa nga grupo. So dapat paprehas imo size or paprehas imo number of people na kukuhaon in each group. Para tawagin ni fair o baga balance, waray bias. Okay, cluster sampling naman is you divide into cluster or areas. This is done when you are researching or experimenting a larger population in a wide geographic region. So, bugos nga Pilipinas, for instance. So, you population divide into cluster areas. So, for instance, in bugos nga Pilipinas, may da ka Visayas, may da ka Mindanao, may da ka Luzon. So, in each Luzon, nga tanan nga region, kukuhaon nimo. Per region mo hiya, pero ating kukuhaon na sa ka region. So ganito, the Visayas naman, nga tanang region may the representative and also in Mindanao. So all units are selected samples, all units in the selected samples are measured. So same with bagatiya hiton, yung kikita mo, kumbaga cluster mo into a less costly and more efficient, especially in population spread across a wide geographic region. Although, depende what ito tim kukuhaan dito to sa nga tawag ito nga region, dapat may dihito here at least naman la depende imo research comparative kinanglan in per region. So pwede usa-usa lang per region. So kita aliwat kung sakto iton size didihiton kumpara nimo na puluhan Luzon, dapat napulo pit ko kaon na Visayas, napulo pit ko kaon nimo ha Mindanao. So dapat sugad dito gihapon baray bias. So how to cluster sample? We have the single stage and multi-stage cluster. So single stage, define your population, define your sample divide your sample into clusters, and then randomly select cluster to use as your sample and collect data from the sample. So more often, this cluster sample is diri hiya bagat para siya stratified pero diri hiya po sang stratified nga imugin prepare characteristic ng nga tawo. Okay, so animo cluster is you random select the clusters may nagkada kahing clusters and per region per tawag ini from Mindanao, from Luzon, Visayas and Mindanao, and you have this group of people na that this is from Luzon, this is from Visayas, this is from Mindanao, and then you select from that cluster, kumpira liwat it imo makukuha ito dida. Okay, and then of course, mahimo na hera nga representative or participants. Ang multi-stage cluster naman or double stage cluster, after nimo ang single stage, mabalik ka naman plug cluster. So meaning, pakahimo nimo hin usa ka cluster, nag-random select ka na hituhiya. Random singuntan from Visayas, Mindanao, nganhin Luzon, may da ka na mga clusters. As kumuha kang taglima, singuntan na polo. Then nahimo mo na ito as your participants or a sample na. Then you will then again do another stage of cluster. So ito yan na tagnuro na polo ba nakyakan no na po so may daka 30. So ito nga 30 for instance lang ha, for example lang, pero dapat damo ito. So ito nga 30 may cluster na liwat, hindi grupo-grupo naman na liwat. And then you will select na liwat randomly. Bakit sa ito multi-stage cluster. So diri ka kurog singot multi-stage cluster, diri nakuha na latutro itong population. Kung ano nakuha, ika-cluster mo na liwat. And then kung gusto mo makatulo, makaupat nga at mag-usa na lating participants, pwede gyapon. Okay, kasi damo manggo pag cluster sample is damo manggo din hirang ng mga populations. A group of people. So kailangan mo ito cluster. Okay. Let's go to non-probability sampling examples. These are the convenience, corposive, quota, and snowball. So non-probability is again the opposite of probability sampling. Probability may chance, may dakat chance nga tanan nga population may chance nga tawag ini select as a participant or a sample. Diba? So non-probability bagan waray chance. So what are the examples? We have convenience, purposive, quota, and snowball. Convenience is adanat ngaran convenient and readily available. Kung hinulat available, sige nala. Ito nala, hera nala iton, kay waray naman iba. Okay, waray iba nga na-api, hera nala. That is convenient sampling. And then, what happens, what are the advantages of convenient sampling? Mas malaksi ang pag-collect ang data. Kasi convenient lang, harani nila, diri ka na mabiyahe. Ikaw mo nala, kay grani ka mo haakon balay. So, di ka mo nala. So, inexpensive methodology, easy to do research, fewer rules to follow. Waray na damo hingan mga arte, di ba? Like your probability sampling, damo pating himuon. And readily available sample and low cost. Okay, so mas madali hiya. Advantage ito hiya. Okay, ang purposive sampling, adat nga may purpose ka, may manimo sinisiring aging purposely select mo hiya ang mga subjects or mga tao. They are based on your predefined criteria. So as an investigator, researcher, may ka predefined criteria. So gusto ko lang, for example, gusto lang niya mag-itom. So ginkuha niya tayo ng mag-itom. So that is purposive sampling. Okay, quota sampling, ibagan similar to stratified random sampling. So may daniya, quota is that may dani mo selected lang except the subjects from each subgroup are not selected randomly. So it's just like a stratified random sampling. You have quota, you have certain sample size lang. Okay, and then you may stratify them into subgroup, but they are not selected randomly. So nahimo ko nagkada ka ng quota, pero ka tawalan nimo na po o sinta ida polo, sinta 50. Pero pagkuha mo hiton nga 50 ka tawo as your sample, as your representative pala, as a sample and representative pala hera. Diri para sa amo nimo sample. And then ito nga 50 kukuhaon mo for instance ini nga sample male above 50 lang. So ito nga sample kikita mo kung hinuan may hinun lang lalaki nga above 50 years old. That is a quota sampling. So diri porosan imo stratified random sampling, di mo randomly select mo, diri ging kikita. Okay, so random select mo la di mo kikita kung hino. So in here more specific. Okay? Snowball sampling happens when you have a very rare condition. So, ani mo bubuhaton, you asked existing subjects kung pira man ang may the condition, Tapos, you may ask them, these subjects or participants, kung hinot ira kilala nga may da para-paras ira condition. So, an usa, manyan duha kilala, and then ini, manya tulo, and so on and so forth. So, bagat pa, bagalahiton, tawag ini, bagahin, mag-a-ask ka lang usa nga subject kasi di ka maaram kung hino ka, very rare man mo condition. So mapakana kami din kilala nga proposed condition tapos to. So those are your participants. Okay, this is used when the characteristics to be studied is rare and it would be extremely difficult and costly to identify individual with this characteristic. So kinala puro pakyana until makakome up kahin sufficient sample size. Okay, snowball sampling consists of two steps. So to identify potential subjects in the population. Okay, may daka 1 or 2 subjects, and then you ask those subjects to recruit other people. So participants should be made aware that they do not have to provide any other name. So just recruit other people. Okay. Anyway, diri ka man hiton simpanaton hanaton informed consent, diri mo natin hihatag itira names. Okay. Let's go to experimental designs. So experimental designs again is to demonstrate or determine the cause and effect relationship between the independent variable, or in this case, the intervention or condition, and the dependent variable, which is the outcome or response. Okay, so one is clinical trial. So this is a very familiar to you, clinical trial, because of pandemic. So this test how well method of screening, prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of a disease work in people. So there are phases of clinical trials. We have 4 phases. Pero nato niya na pamatik ko nag-phase 3 la kutob naton clinical trial naton COVID-19 kasi kinahanglan na naton i-disseminate an vaccine. So nagkikadam mo na an cases. So phase 1 is for safety purposes. So you just need few number of people para lang kung in kaso for safety man good kung mamamatay hira or diri. So you identify also the side effects kung anong side effects. So kailan lang gutay la tawo kasi in case may mamatay o magkamatay hira gutay ay la. So phase 2 is ani meron nga sa pagayong kula di nga. Okay. Phase 2 is much larger population kasi you are assessing this not only the safety but the effectiveness. So effectiveness imo. So after phase 1, so okay hera, phase 1 waray nagkamatay, gutila nagkamatay. So ma-provide ka naman another group of people, say okay la singuntan 80 and 100 people in phase 1, 80 and singuntan na pulo la or 90 and waray namatay, okay? So waray mga adverse effects singuntan. Then you may phase 2, you may find a group of people naman with larger group of people, larger participants para liwat makita nimo also the safety, continue assessing the safety and now the effectiveness. So, tama ba dosing? Tama daan imo dose nga ginhatag? Sakto ba? Effective ba? And then, phase 3 naman is mas larger hiyang participants. So, kikita, monitor nimo ang side effects. Kasi from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, monitor mo ang side effects ini. But in phase 3, it's more of efficacy. Okay, effective ba ang iya tawagin no ang dose na ginhatag kasi safety and dosing kung sakto or diri, and then safety and efficacy mean phase 3 bagat effective ba inihiya, okay ba kasi i-monitoring mo hiya na certain time nga effective ba inihiya na waray ba na expose mo na COVID-19 na nagkada ba yan COVID-19 or diri. And then you may stop phase 3 in which in this phase 3 gisasubmit mo na an medicine, okay, or any vaccine for FDA approval. So, gine-review niya, kung drug approved hiya, then pwede ka mag phase 4 dayon. which is post-approval surveillance kasi after na hiya ma-approve ang FDA. So ang phase 3 is to obtain more information about the risk, benefits, and the best use of drug or therapy. Okay, so mas larger population ng phase 4. So kita, phase 4 kita, kaya nga tanan na kita hinigin, testingan. Okay. Next is completely randomized design. It means, or also known as the parallel group design. So kung sumay ka nga ni parallel group design, it is experimental study or known as a completely randomized design, in which treatments are assigned completely at random, so that experimental unit has the same chance of receiving only one treatment. So anong paghimo ini? Parallel lang. Random assigned students to treatment. So may dakita group 1, group 2 ng students. Then ini nga group 1, may niya ginhatag imo nga treatment A, which is no practice exam. This is example lang ha. And treatment B, may practice exam. So i-compare mo lang exam results. So yun lang. That is a parallel group design of experimental study. Crossover design naman is subjects receive both treatment. So kung nagko-crossover, kay kanina parallel lang. So ini nga subject, in a group, sinunta study participant, you randomize them into, or you random select them into group 1 or group A, group B, and then may diyan mo treatment A nga ginhatag, then treatment B. So may dani mo sinisiring nga period of no treatment. So may daka time interval diding between treatments, duha nga treatments nga waray nira treatment ito nga time. So bahala ka kung depende mo study. And then what happened next, you may check for effects on this period, washout period. Okay, sorry. Okay. So washout period. And then pag after this period nga waray treatment, imulot diha again baliktad. Ang treatment ini nga group A nag-receive ang treatment B, while then group B nag-receive ang treatment A. And then you check an era result. So each subject serves as their own control. So wala nila control group ini. Okay? So that is crossover design. So wala ning babasihan, di ba? Wala ning babasihan kasi wala hirangatanan kasi so when you say control group, wala ning babasihan hin waray treatment kasi nga tanan hera may that treatment. Although nag-crossover lahera, nag-crossover. Kaya kikita lang din ni kung which one it ma-open nira hatag na treatment anay. Which one should be initially given nga treatment. Amugin ko crossover design hira. Okay, yung kikita nira effect. Kung itunahon ba A, kung unahon ba B. Okay. So, next. Factorial design naman, this is 2 or more factors in a single experiment. You classify by the number of levels of each factor and number of factors. Okay, so example of this is a major exam in science and arts. So experiences from underclassmen and upperclassmen. So we have a factor of underclassmen and upperclassmen, and all of them receive all the exams. Okay, so many 2 or more factors in which may science, may arts, and then both of them actually have this dira crossover design kasi papres sila nag-take anong science, papres sila nag-take in arts. Okay? So depende niya imo liwat research kung damo mga factors imo kinanglan. So inihiragin yung kuha ang mean final exam scores han science, han underclassmen and upperclassmen, the same with the arts. So ikikita ang difference. Kung may dabaan between experience han underclassmen, upperclassmen, ikikita ang experience nila han pag-take science and arts nga exam. So that's example. Okay. We have this pre-test, post-test control group design. So it is comparing the outcomes of 2 or more groups formed by random assignment. So may dakita sisi nga, adat nga ran pre-test and post-test, may daka before and after treatment nga test. Okay, this is a basic format of randomized control trial. So if you check hani mga experimental study, may daka mga pre-test or post-test. So this is a common format. So may daka mo treatment group and a control group. So di ba niya treatment group, those are the people or group of participants who receive no treatment or does not receive any treatment or who received standard treatment or mga sinisiring mga dating ang mga treatment or old treatment, di ba? And then the treatment group are those are given a new treatment, ang bagong nga treatment, kasi compare nimo. So we have the pre-test and post-test. So you have outcome measures that you're going to use for the pre-test, which is the same outcome measure na gagamit nimo post-test. So compare mo ang ERA result. So this is another design, which is the post-test only control group. So at yung ngaran, post-test lang, so wala niya pre-test. Post-test that iya may da. So amula difference nera. So at yung ngaran, wala niya pre-test, only post-test. So it compares two or more groups formed by random assignment by testing all groups only after the treatment. Okay. Next. So randomized controlled trial is a clinical trial in which a group of individuals randomly assigned to an experimental group and control group. So how do you, what is the process of randomized controlled trial? So may nakita din enrollment. When you say enrollment, mga participants. Okay, pakada mo na imo, okay, pa-enroll mo na nga dan imo, nakuha mo na nga sample. And then after that, we have the allocation, the follow-up, and analysis. So under enrollment, you assess for eligibility. So sa anot eligibility is that dependent imo characteristic ang kukuha. Eligible ba ito? So in certain characteristic like nakakalakat, di waray ginagamit nga. That's all those are characteristics of your sample. Kaya dependent imo research. Nakakalakatan dapat ang imo mga sample or mga participants. Waray ginagamit nga at tawagin nga assistive device. For example, age, pwede ito eligibility ni mga criteria. Age, anong age niya dapat? All adult ba niya? Okay, so dapat may dakit nga criteria. Female and male participants. Okay, labay mo ang male or both or female la. So, in assessing for eligibility, may dahito ni mo ma-exclude. Okay, so 100 nga tao ang nag-enroll, haimo sa participants, naghatag in-inform consent. Pero imo pito ga-assess sira kung i-enroll mo ba. Kasi pag informed consent, pwede hira maging participants or not. Pwede hira ma-excluded pa imo study kasi mag-assess ka pati mo eligibility criteria. So, pa-exclude dira. Then, after that, ma-include na ang mga included, dira randomized assign mo. That is what we call allocation. There's allocation to intervention. So, may allocation intervention. So, dili pa ito na hinabuan perfect kasi in allocation of intervention or during the intervention or allocation pala, may dagihapon tao nga na diri naka-receive intervention kasi pwede hiya nag-walk out, pwede hiya wala na umapi. Okay, so that is the disadvantage lang kasi anytime pwede man harang gumawas. Okay, so may tao nga naka-receive intervention, may dalot waray naka-receive intervention. So may dagihapon waray maka-receive intervention kasi diri nag-walk out, may dalap niya problem. Okay, nagkadayang problem. So upon receiving the intervention, dili pat nagtatapos imo kalbaryo dida. Okay, you need to have a follow-up period. Kasi upon receive intervention, may dito time nga ito nimo participant na discontinue intervention or in the middle of intervention, dili nahiya. Okay, di na ako kapoy man ini. Then, nag-follow up ka, na-lost ani mo follow up, waray na nimo ka-contact, waray mo naka-check kung ano na imo mga participants. So, kung those who are na-followed up mo, may include diya for analysis. But again, during analysis, pwede gyapira diri ma-include kasi nagkada kahin problem, nagkada kahin tungod na ini nga process, nagkada kahin problem sa sample size. Gumurugutin na nimo sample size. So, warin heka include an analysis. Okay, anyway. So, bagat suga dito. Okay, so yung mga scenario. So, dapat sufficient got imo sample size kasi in this randomized control trial, pwede hira diri na magpadayon. Okay. Repeated measures design is also known as within subjects design. And subjects are tested under all conditions. So repeated measures mean kadamo hira pag tataganhin treatment. Okay, for this example, these are may levels sira. So may nanara treatment nga tulo, which or condition. So an era independent variable is the condition or treatment or the type of cake. Tapos an era dependent variable and taste score. Anon era marasa? Ang chocolate cake ba, caramel cake ba, lemon cake ba? So amay ton era. So ngatan hira group of people kumaon hin chocolate cake. Tapos gin test, nagin test hira, tagan hiran taste score kung anong rasa. And then gin kadto naman hiran second treatment which is the caramel cake. Kita na naman kung ang rasa and then and last treatment which is lemon cake. So ngatan hira natanhiran tagan hin chance ito nga treatment and also repeatedly. Damo nga treatment, repeated measures. Okay, we have the sequential clinical trial. This is a pre-planned repeated series of comparison that are stopped as soon as decision can be made as to whether the evidence is sufficient to show a significant difference between treatments. So, puro pa dahil niya, repeated measures GAPIA, this is a clinical trial. Sequence means repeated or in a sequence. From this level, kung ano an effect, then i-move to the next level, ano an effect, until makitahan iya may evidence na nga significant na difference or may the effect na talaga. So may stop na kamo kung saan nagkakadan effect. So example of this sequential trial is intagan mo duha nga tawo usa is low dose of treatment and the other one is high dose of treatment. So when low dose is effective and high dose has adverse drug reactions, so pwede niya mag-abandon the study na. Okay, stop na kasi low dose is effective na. So if low dose is ineffective and high dose is effective, kasi pag saring mo nga di up and down method kasi in here, so it could be nga di or nga di. So kung pwede nga di, pag low dose is effective and high dose is effective, so pwede ka mag-continue. If both low dose or high dose are ineffective, stop ka na. Kaya kailangan mo kasi hiya, either if low dose is effective or high dose is effective. Kasi kailangan makita mo which one is effective. So, pwede nila mag-sequence until may the effect kan iya medication. Pero kung wala effect, stop ka gihapon. Kasi wala man yan effect. Bisan high dose or low dose. So, this is sequential clinical trial. Single subject design naman is, adahan name, single lang patient or participant. So, drawing conclusion about the effects of treatment based on the response of a single patient or participant. There's also a repeated measure and you have this baseline phase. Ano yung baseline phase is that baseline nga tawag ito nga if you have this test, niya baseline nga test, or if you have this, another baseline phase is that pag niya baseline nga, for example, vital signs, and then what happened to the vital signs during intervention. Then you have another baseline. After baseline 2 naman is that, example inihan, first demonstration of effect, okay, intervention 1, and during that time, you take my vital sign, then after, and second demonstration of effect, this one, ang baseline 2 naman is ginkita mulat ang effect kaniya vital sign after an intervention, and so on and so forth. So, bagang continuous lang hiya. Many baseline phase, many intervention phase, kasi di mo niya makikita difference kung wala ni mo baseline phase. Kailangan may baseline phase ka para makita mo an effect after one intervention, then after ikaduhang intervention. So these phases may replicate to create a number of designs. So pwede AB, ABA, or ABAB nga design. So pwede pwede mong tagaan ABA and ABAB. Dependehan im intervention. Depending kada mo im intervention. So the quasi-experimental design is ang pagkakaibalahin ni other design is that it has no control group. Pero an assignment of the subjects are randomly assigned. Okay? So we have one group pre-test, post-test design. So Milikap niya one group pre-test, post-test design. Kasi quasi experimental wala niya control group. So one group lang hiya. So it measures one group of subjects before and after treatment. So an imo time is the independent variable with two levels. Kasi an imo time between the pre-test and post-test, yung kikita mula. Amon imo pinaka-independent variable. Amon imo pre-test and post-test independent variable, tapos ang result is the dependent variable. So we have another way, which is one way repeated measure design over time. So extension of one group pre-test, post-test design. So it measures one group of subject at a multiple prescribed time intervals. So adaline hiya, when you say repeated measures, may dala niya ang under quasi-experimental design. So one group lapin hiya, pero ang iya between han iya pre-test and post-test, may dala niya bagaro halaba nga, or pwede gihapon after pre-test, nag-intervention ka, then post-test, yung tagaan mo yan, interval for another intervention or another pre-test, then intervention and post-test. So may dahito. That is a repeated measures design. Okay. We have the time series design naman. It is a multiple measurements are made before and after treatment to observe patterns during pre-treatment and post-treatment period. So multiple measurements. Okay, before and after treatment. So diri lahiya in pre-test, diri la usa lang nga test yung ginhatag. Amo kag sini diri la ang post-test, diri la usa nga outcome measure ani mo gin gamit. So they have multiple measurements in one pre-treatment, in one pre-test, and another multiple naman for another post-treatment, post-test. So that is another time series design. Okay, let's go to experimental controls. So far naintindihan guys, or nangangatulog na kamo? Naintindihan? I think about recap na lang ha iyo. Intindihan?
Yes, ma'am.
Nakatulog na din hera. Anyway, experimental controls is we provide control group, di ba? Kasi we need to have an internal validity aton study. Di ba? Kailangan may control kita. Control is used to reduce extraneous variable and sources of bias. So we need to have a control. So mas maupay kung mag-experimental study ka, may new control group. Hindi na kasi nakikita ito internal validity ito sa experimental study. So, in the control group, kumbaga in experimentation gihapon, you need to have an instrument or outcome measure to establish validity and reliability of your study. So, if you want to choose an outcome measure, if you need to choose an outcome measure, it should be the gold standard outcome measures. Para na hiyanagod talaga ito rin na iba. Okay, so kung if you need to have instruments, may damang good talaga ito outcome measure nga gamitin, gamit ka ng gold standard. Kasi kung di ka nagamit yung gold standard, i-question na naman itong validity and reliability itong na instrument. Okay, so that's it. Another addition information, if you're going to use instrument which needed nga ita-translate mo pa into waray-waray or any language, imo gapit og test, mag-provide ka reliability and validity testing ito. So saan mo ito sabak nga imo winaray-waray nga test, kasi kung example, an imo outcome measure is the ano ba ito yung outcome measure? Okay, singunta. Anyway, naton nga ni mga 6-minute walk test like that, pwede man ito niya diri winaray-waray. Itimula explanation is winaray-waray. Pero dapat gihapon itiya i-test in terms of reliability. Kung naintindihan ito ni mga patient or mga participants din pagkaway na ray-waray. Nang kung paprehas gapit yung pagyakan hito nga, pag-explain hito nga instruction nga tanan nga participants. So it's another way of the 6-minute walk test, imogin test anya validity and reliability kasi gin-translate mo hiya into winaray-waray nga instruction. So kailangan gapit hiya i-test before igsabak mo hiya into during the methodology ba igsabak mo hiya. Sana yung magsabak, i-test mo ani hiya. So So, damo ito, kasi makurit aton kasi yung research, kailangan naton, at least naman maintindihan hitaton mga participants. Labi na kaiba't aton language. Okay, blinding and masking, di ba nayakan nakita ni is to describe conditions that impose to keep groups of individuals from knowing which subjects have not received any intervention. So this is a way of reducing bias and the placebo effect. So gimamask mo, gimblablay mo ng participant kung din hiragin kadtong intervention. So we have a single blind in which the subjects unaware have the research hypothesis and the group to which they were assigned until the end of the study. Okay, sing mo na lahira after. So di ra maaram kung ginkadto control group or experimental group. Ikaw nga researcher, you don't need to explain them nga ato ka group. Kasi i-explain mo lang nga duha ka grupo ti mo tatagan. So if you are there's a single blind, subjects are blinded. Double blind is subjects are blinded as well as the research team. Unaware. So, pwede ang main investigator or the main researcher amulan maaram. Pero ani mo mga colleague nga nabuligay mo dira maaram. Triple blind is subject, members of the research team, and data analyzers are unaware. So, pwede gapito ani analyzers or mga statistician diri gapira maaram. Okay, kung that is triple blind. So, mas maupay triple blind. Pero mas mapinagapit ito ang double blind. Dapat may blinding. Any research study, experimental study, may blinding is good study. So mas maupay may blinding. Whether it is single, double, mas magganado pa kung triple blind. Gime-mention man iniha research or experimental study if it is triple blind, double blind, or single blind. Okay, so in case nga you allocate a group nga waray intervention, nga usa nga group nga may intervention, kung waray intervention, dapat may niraging bubuhat. Ngan, di rehira maaram nga kung ginihimo dito usa nga group. Dapat bulag hirahin area, harayo hiran area, nga di ra magkaka-restoryahay, masing ka lang nga, usa ka mga building, pero different rooms, pero pagkakagawas nila, nag-istorya hira. So, di rehira single blind, di rin na blinded. So, dapat harayo hira, di rin na magkakilala, agrayo hirahin areas para di rin na magkakorestorya. So, di rin maaram, ini nga participants nga may dausa nga group. Pwede gapito. Okay, di rin maaram nga grupo, may da pangin usa nga group, duha nga hira nga grupo. So, gani dapat ito para di rin hiya bias. Okay, control group, in clinical trial, a group against which a treatment group is compared. So, may nakita control group, may nakita control group. They are identical to the treatment group. So, dapat ang characteristic ng control group are identical kung animo treatment group. They used to have isolate the effect of dependent variable, eliminate the unintended influence extraneous factors, or mga confounding factors, diba? So, dapat hera ito may natong control group para makikita natin talaga kung it really the effect is ano good ang effect kan new treatment. Okay? So, control group could have two common forms. The active control is a non-effective form of treatment in clinical trial. So, against which experimental treatment is compared. Okay? When effective treatment is available, it is unethical to use a placebo control for comparison to experimental treatment. So, active control is that when you say active control is that they have something to do. Okay? Di nila nag-inukoy hera. Okay? So, they have something to do aside hanimo treatment, bago nga treatment. You need to provide them something to do. Okay? So, dapat kasi unethical naman ito, wala ni mo bubuhaton papag inukoy mo lera dito, papag minanera dapat bubuhaton. Okay? So, the placebo control naman is an active substance or treatment that looks the same as, and it is administered in the same way as an active drug or treatment. So, depende lang it kung may ka substance na ginahatag. So, dapat may placebo control. Tatagan mo lotera. So, when you say active control kanina, they have this activity. So, placebo control naman, it is pertaining to the substance or any treatment nga tutumaron nera. Okay, so dapat may danera tutumaron na the same with the independent treatment group nga may gitutuma pero di rin parehas la. Okay, matching and pairing. This is a strategy for attempting to control for differences between subjects. You identify pairs of subjects who have identical characteristics. So matching and pairing is that in terms of weight, for instance, weight, race, and age before you randomize them. So, ang mga sinisinghay mo, dapat match. Match iton characteristic hit control ngan hiton treatment group. So, kung peran weight, may representative din ng mga slim, hand control, may representative din, papresent kadamuhan, representative din mga slim liwat ha treatment group. So, dapat match. Waray bias. Match na exactly the same. For example, using identical twins is a classic example of matching. So, identical twins, imo hira igbubulag. Igbubulag mo hira o sa control o sa treatment. So, match ran duha kasi papares ra, identical hira. So, the same characteristics. So, the same with if you're going to have a control group, dapat pareha siya treatment group para waray bias. Okay, intention to treat analysis is a method of analysis in which all subjects randomly assigned to one of the treatments are analyzed together. So whether your subjects in a treatment group or in a control group, they should be analyzed together. They should be analyzed the same. Intention to treat nga ni, they should be waray bias kasi nakaturang control group ay napag-analyze. Dirihiyaw po ng analysis. Intention to treat analysis dapat inhirangatanan na grupo i-analyze, okay? A strategy for analysis for randomized controlled trials that compares patients in the groups to which they were originally randomly assigned. So kung di man nila nga group, whether other control or patawagin ni control or experimental treatment group, dapat gin-analyze ka pera. That is intention to treat analysis. So when you are checking an experimental study, you need to check this term, intention to treat analysis. Kung na-mention nila, maupay ito nga, valid ito hiya nga research. Kasi, gin-treat niya, gin-analyze niya nga tanan, the same thing, the same analysis niya ginbuhat to both groups. So, dapat adan hira ha. So, if you're going to check for validity, kasi assignment niya, magpe-Pedro scale ka mo, you need to check intention to treat analysis. May kita ito pagbasa at iya research kung may dahinig, buhatin niya. Okay, this is done to avoid the effects of crossover or dropout, which may break the random assignment to treatment groups. If there is a dropout, there should be included for analysis. Bisan nara nag-drop out, waray na hira ka follow up, they should be included for analysis. Kaya pwede i-bias nga. Nag-drop out material nila pag iniupura. It should not be like that. So it should be analyzed. All of the participants nga na-allocate mo, na-include mo yung participants, include mo yung research, whether nag-drop out ya o di, include lagapi ang analysis. Kaya upod lagapi ito ya, although you have to mention lang kung pera nag-drop out, peraan waray waray ka follow up. So you have to just mention that. Pero an analysis included hera. Okay? So dapat ma-preserve an original balance of subject groups. So amay nihiyaan yung ka-importante intention to treat analysis. So this is a strategy for intention to treat analysis with incomplete observation. So attempt to follow up all randomized participants even if they withdraw from allocated treatment. So, if they withdraw from the treatment, tapos, you need to follow them up. Kung ano ang result, whether warahera katapos or initially nakadala sa ka-treatment, kung para man mo treatment, bisa na rin katapos, basta ka naupo diharan imo research, i-follow up lera, kumusta na hera? Okay, perform a main analysis of all observed data that are valid under the plausible assumption about the missing data. So, analyze lagabi ito, bisang may missing data. You have to analyze, kasi included lagapiya. That is intention to treat analysis. To perform also sensitivity analysis to explore the effect of departures from the assumption made in the main analysis. So, to explore the effect of departure. So, kitaon ni mo, sana, diri mag-drop out, diri damo. Kasi kung damo nag-drop out, makikita mo kung ano luwat ang effect an iya validity ito nga study. Kasi kung nagdamon drop out, pwede diri gud hiya baga sugad ka valid. Okay? Pero instead of Also, bisan kung damo nag-drop out, include the pre-analysis. Account for all randomized participant list a sensitivity analysis. So again, for sensitivity analysis, kung kailangan talaga niya whether upo niya or diri completely nakakuha niya nga treatment or diri upo lagapit analysis. Okay? External validity, that is ang internal validity, di ba? External validity naman, amoy ni an degree to which a result of a research study are generalizable to population or circumstances beyond those included in the study. So internal validity, we all know, iton effectiveness, ito usa nga or ano ba ang relationship o kung effective ba ang imo treatment or diri, that is internal validity. Intervention being evaluated is the cause of the outcome measured in the study or not the result of extraneous factors. Dapat makita nimo nga an intervention talaga ang naka-cause han effect diri ang mga confounding factors. Okay, diri ang mga other factors. So dapat makita mo in studying ang naka-cause and effect is the intervention mismo or intervention nga question. Or okay, randomization, marunong kita ito, it's assigning subjects to groups in experiment or to the random auto-control group. Okay, so now we go to assessing validity experimental study. We use Pedro scale. This is help us to rapidly identify trials that are likely to be internally valid and have sufficient statistical information. Whether we can use that research as our part of our clinical decision making. So on Pedro scale, it ranges from 0 to 10 for each for each level. For instance, here, 0 to 10. Okay, so this is a Pedro scale. So, may 11, didi nga, pangingitaon ni mo usang research study. So, eligibility criteria were specified. So, when you say eligibility criteria, na-specified ni ba yung characteristic kanin iya mga participants? So, kukuha ni mo yes. Kung where diin nga part hiya again mention. So, magbabasa ka mo sa nga research study or specifically experimental study, kikita mo niya. This is to know if that research study is valid or not. Okay, kita. Subjects were randomly allocated to groups. Okay, kung yes ba or no. Allocation was concealed. When you say allocation was concealed, blind bahira kung din hira allocate ang participant nito control group ba, experimental group, dire bahira maaram or maaram hira. That is allocation was concealed. So na blind bahira kung din hira control, ma-mention man ito itong research kay if the allocation was concealed or not. And the groups were similar at baseline regarding the most important prognostic indicators. So, yung kikita mo nga, anira baseline are similar ba? So, singon ta may pre-test nila, paprehas ba nila baseline? So, kikita mo ito, there was blinding of all subjects. So, kikita mo kung yes or no, kung nag-blind sa all subjects, or single-blinded, or blinding of all therapies who administer the therapy. This is double-blinded, or blinding all assessors who measure at least one key outcome. This is triple-blinded. So, kikita mo kung single-blind ba, may yes or no ba, double-blinded ba, or triple-blinded. Okay. Now, measure at least one key outcome were obtained from more than 85% of the subject initially allocated to groups. So, kailangan in that experimental study, measure, may naman nila outcome measure gingamit. Okay. Pre-test, gingamit or any outcome measure pre-test na gingamit. O sige, yes or no, kita ang babasahon niyo. Kung singon nila ni skimming nga kabasa, dapat yung babasahon ko niyo. All subjects from whom outcome measure available received the treatment or control condition as allocated, or whether it was not the case, Where this was not the case, data for at least one key outcome was analyzed by intention to treat. Again, na-mention intention to treat. So, dapat na-mention, mention in experimental study. So, the results of between group statistical comparison report for at least one key outcome. Okay, so again, after natin yung post-test, so na-determine ba ang result? Na-compare ba ang result? And both groups? And at least gingamit yung usang outcome measure, which is actually basically ginagamit natin ang outcome measure, pre-test and post-test are basically the same. So, kitaon mo ito kung na tiya. Kasi bangin laliwat post-test only nga design, so adilat yan matche-check. Dinhit. Pero kung may pre-test and post-test, adiduduhat yung matche-check. And the study provides both point measures and measures of variability for at least one key outcome. So this one, this is in terms of statistics. Okay, study provides both point measures and measures of variability for at least one key outcome. So you need to check the outcome of measures. Kung anong iya point measure. Okay, so anong iya variability. Pisa nala di rin niniupod na lain ni, this is more of the statistics. So okay lagi hapon. Anyway, kung mamakita niyo, okay la. Okay lagi hapon mo diri. So this is you have to check yes or no and where research study mo nakita. Ang pagbasa nimo di mo nakita nga part. Ha methodology ba? Ha discussion ba nga part? Okay, you need to ha introduction ba nga part? So that or ha result nga part. So most often 11, 10, 8, 9 ha results. Data results, and this more are probably what are more of a methodology from 1 to 7. Okay, so I'm on Pedro scale. So let's move to the hypothesis testing. So this is when you say hypothesis testing, you're testing if your hypothesis is correct or not to examine the probability that some estimates calculated from sample data might have occurred by chance. So probability. Okay, so may hypothesis, may null, may alternative hypothesis. So what is a p-value? P-value is you need to determine your p-value kasi this is your basis. Whether this is basis kung na an imo null hypothesis na reject or not rejected. Ano pa ito null hypothesis naton? Okay, waray tawo. Ano ito null hypothesis? We say null hypothesis, there is no significant difference between two variables that you are being compared. So null hypothesis means there's no significant difference. So you need to determine your p-value before you start your research. Kasi during statistics, during analysis, the result of analysis, gimbabasihan nato ni mo p-value. Okay, kung yung mo p-value is smaller than the stated value or level of significance, kung singon ta ang imo p-value is 0.001, the smaller than that, you reject the null hypothesis kasi it is there's a significant difference. But if your p-value is larger, you should not reject your null hypothesis kasi waray niya difference. You have to accept. So p-value should be determined before. That's why when you submit or when you make a research proposal, ma-determine ka na dito hiti mo p-value kumpara. Kasi yung base mo ito hiya whether you reject the null hypothesis or not. Whether when you reject the null hypothesis, meaning there's a significant difference. When you said you're not rejecting the null hypothesis, there's no significant difference. So these are steps in testing statistical hypothesis. So you provide the data, you state the hypothesis, you select test statistics, Okay, then when you select test statistics, it means you need to find you need to determine your p-value. Kung magsiset ka, yung set ka yung p-value para ka makasabot kung if you have rejected or gin-accept an hypothesis. Then you calculate the test, and then the result will decide kung you reject or you do not reject the null hypothesis, sorry. So the p-value is less than or greater than the level of significance, reject. Marami naman kita yun eh. If it is less than or equal to the p-value, we reject kasi the null hypothesis, you're in favor with the alternative hypothesis kasi there's significant difference. Okay, if the p-value is greater than the level of significance, do not reject the null hypothesis kasi waray man niya difference. Okay, hypothesis testing. May mga type 1, type 2 error kita. Type 1 is known as your alpha error. Your type 2 is beta error. What happened is, we have null hypothesis here. It could be true or false, diba? Hindi nga side liwat. This is the decision. Whether you reject or you do not reject the null hypothesis. Now, the null hypothesis will depend upon, you're setting a null, the result will depend upon the p-value that you are setting. Okay, so once you set the p-value and then the result of the statistics, you will determine whether the decision, or you will decide whether you reject or do not reject the null hypothesis. So the true negative is that do not, kasi true negative ang ginawa sa result, true negative, meaning, when you say true negative, you do not reject the null hypothesis, it is a true talaga hiya, nga waray talaga, waray talaga significant difference. That's a true negative. True positively, what is that? Ang kagagawsan ni mo statistic is that true positive, nga meaning, may na talaga significant difference. What happens in type 2 and type 1 error? Type 1 error is false positive. What is again false positive? Okay, wala na mamati. Wala na akong estudyante ada. What is false positive? May na niya difference. May na kuno niya difference, pero wala talaga difference. What happens there if you commit a type 1 error? Okay, upon statistic, ginawa sa ni statistics and result. Okay. So, mering waray talaga niya difference. Pero, an imo decision, nasa rin ka na may difference. That is type 1 error. That is false positive. Ang paggawa sa statistics, waray difference. Pero nag-decide ka nga, may difference. That is type 1 error. So do not commit this type of errors, ha. And then, false negative naman, there's no difference. Pero there is. May talaga difference. Okay. What happened is, ang type 2 error is false negative. So, nagkadak after statistics nimo. Okay, nagkadakahin statistics, pero there's no difference. False, waray difference. Okay, pero nagsiring ka, i-reject mo kasi may kuno difference. Okay, that's false negative. There's no difference or relationship when there is actually. Sorry again. There is false, meaning null hypothesis was rejected. Sorry. There's false. Null hypothesis is there is no, kasi pag null hypothesis, there is no difference. So, may difference siya. May difference siya, pero gin-reject mo hiya, kaya nasa rin ka nga, may niya difference. Waray niya difference. So, that is type 2 error. So, do not commit these errors kasi na-base kapiton imo decision. Okay, so you have to make sure there's a true negative and true positive, not false negative, not false positive. Okay, nabase ka lang imo decision. Okay, what is alpha level? What or A level? Amo yung sinisiri nga significant level. Alpha level is known as your significant level. The probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true, or the chance of committing a type 1 error. So you need to have a significant level para masigurado ka nga diri ang imo result happens by chance kasi nag-set ka in value. So what is the value is 0.05 or 0.01. I'm not saying kanina, this is a p-value. These are p-values, but the significant level, either 0.05 or 0.01. If you need to set a p-value, you need to choose one only. Is it 0.05 or 0.01? Okay, o 0.01 or 0.05. So dapat makuha ka lang ang salida. Kasi di kat maaram kung magkuha ka adi, ang gawsan, edi nga yan mo katapos. You have to be consistent. If it is 0.01, so if less than or equal to 0.01 and result, it means there's a significant difference in which you reject the null hypothesis. Pero kung nag-set ka nga 0.0, if there's greater than 0.01 or 0.1 ang ginawa sa result, you will not reject the null hypothesis kasi there's no significant difference. So this is, it determines nimo, you will be determining whether to reject or to accept the null hypothesis after the statistics or analysis. So nakita mo niya. So alpha level is a significant level. Kailangan mo mag-set in significant level para makasabot ka na hindi ka makakommit ng type 1 error. Para makasabot ka na ang imo result does not happen by chance. Okay? Diriya nag-happen by chance. Dapat ang imo result tuod talaga. Kasi nag-set ka in alpha level. Okay, the difference between p-value and alpha level. Alpha level is another term for significant level or significance level. It is again, it's a probability that you will make the mistake of rejecting the null hypothesis when in fact it is true. So you need to set a significant level. While p-value is now, it measures the probability of getting more extreme value than the one you got from the experiment. Okay, so when you say p-value, pwede kasi inihiya p-values. Inihiya. So when you say p-value of nag-set ka. So nag-set ka. So it is also known as your significant level. Kasi nag-set ka ito nga level in which nga diri ka makakommit yung type 1 error. Or you can also you can also determine whether you reject or accept the null hypothesis. Okay, let's go to statistically significant. So, statistical significance is a statistical conclusion. Amo ting ginagamit liwat when you're concluding the difference between groups or the relationship between variables. So, it is a probability that there's a small chance nga, the probability nga small nga na hinabo nga by chance la. Okay. So, when you say there's a significant, statistically significant difference, it meaning, ito hiya, di by chance nga, kasi nag-set ka, di ba? Nag-set ka in significant level. So, diri ito hiya na hinabo by chance. Amo gud talaga na hinabo. Okay, it is likely not caused by chance for given statistical significance levels. So, statistically significant, you have to, this is your conclusion. Conclusion after the statistics or after analysis. So, i-conclude mo nala if there's a difference between groups or if there's a relationship between variables. So, if you say statistically significant, there is a statistically significant difference. It meaning ito, pag nagyakan ka ito, it does not happen by chance. Okay? Amo talaga ang nahinabo. I hope you understand that. Okay, statistical power naman liwat is that yes, the analysis or the outcome of the research or outcome of the statistics nagkada kain significant difference or statistically significant difference. Pero statistical power is that the chance that a statistical test will lead to rejection of false null hypothesis. You are trying to use this statistical power para mas ma-reject mo pa ang null hypothesis. Okay? So it's how likely the studies distinguish an actual effect from one of chance. So nagkada ka pa p-value, nagkada pa kang significant level, tagaan mo pa statistical power para an imo talaga result or does not happen by chance or na-reject mo talaga, magiging gagamitin mo niya nga magiging further reject mo liwat an imo null hypothesis. So kung may ka man statistical power, mas marupay. Now, the effect size naman liwat is that you have the significant difference between the variables, given variables. May ka statistically significant difference. But you do not know the magnitude of the difference. So dapat mag-provide ka effect size. So you undergo mo latin hiya to determine the effect size. So may measure mo na liwatin hiya, quantitative measure in hiya, experimental study, nga gaano kakusog an effect. Okay? And gaano kakusog ang difference between those two treatments or between o kung may man relationship. May relationship man ang duha nga variables, pero gaano kakusog. So, mas maupay kuhaong gapanimon measurement and effect size. So, the larger the effect size, the stronger the relationship between two variables. So, mas maupay ko, ang effect size mas durda ko, statistically, ihatag mo natin hiyan, kuhaan mo natin an effect size. So, sayang ka statistician na kuhaan ko ng effect size ko, kitaon ko kung how strong the difference or how strong the relationship. So, kung makita mo nga dako ni effect size, strong niya talaga relationship. Or strong niya difference. Okay? So, the larger the effect size, the more likely to be statistically significant. Ayun. Mas damo pat imo ways nga makuha nga strong evidence mo nga may talaga nira difference or statistically significant difference. So kuha mo niya statistical power and also the effect size. Okay, let's go to minimal clinical important difference. This is pertaining to the outcome measures, diba? So nabaro na kamo hini, this is a patient-derived scores that reflect changes in a clinical intervention. So there's a change in clinical intervention that is meaningful for the patient. So may effect ka iya. Okay? So an important concept for judging if changes report in the patient's status. So kikita mo ni mo sa anak niya nga minimal clinically important difference. At least naman lam difference or change na experiencehan usa nga patient. Clinically means na experience niya ito nga intervention. When you say naman minimal detectable difference is that na-detect mo lahan usa nga outcome measure. May niya smallest naman la difference or change that is significant and patient, okay, may kadakan patient score. Example in the multiple sclerosis and usa nga outcome measure may minimal detectable change of 95% confidence. Meaning dakon iya an iya patient score may niya change naman la minimum amount of change from the pre-test to post-test. So kita nimo na nag-change man hiya. Okay, this is minimal detectable change. Kaya nakikita mo. Minimal clinically important difference is na experiencehan imo patient. Okay? So that's it for experimental design. So any question? My question?
None so far, ma'am.
Okay, so I guess you understand or understood the concept. Okay na iyo. So ano na lang, sorry. What's this? Answer na lahat niyo. Formative assessment 1 and 2. And then, ano ka mga participants? Anyway, so we'll and next week ngayon, wala kita kay Holy Week. So it is tawagin ni so wala kita klase. So, okay lang. Kaya man gini ko naman iyo ang tawag ini iyo schedule nga may dagita holiday kita next week. So wala klase. So, but continue lang piti formative assessment ha, every 2 weeks. So, bisan wala ka mo klase next week, bahala ka mo kung himuon or diri. Basta, pa the following week, ma-deadline na hiya. Okay, if there's no questions, sige, thank you for attending. And also, don't forget ang atong class activity for experimental study. Okay, that would be, yes?
Ang activity, ma'am, bali pagka 21 pa, ma'am.
Oh, next na nato. Wari pa kita, tawagin niyo daw natin schedule. So, after experimental study, holiday, then another na naman nga observational study design, then before midterm, class activity. Saan ba 21 yung sinisiring? So, 14, 28 pa. Kasi 14 holiday, then we have 21 observation study design or observational design. Then 28 will be the class activity. Then May 1st is the midterm exam. Sakto ano? Sakto. So,
Yes, ma'am.
last week of April pa, a new class activity. So I hope naintindihan. There's bali niyo class activity, upod na observational study. So, mag-observation study na kita nga discussion, then upod nagkapad to niyo class activity para duhat yung activity. Okay, say thank you. So far, where kita face-to-face kuan nato na listening to research. Diyan kinahanglan mag face-to-face. Nagyakan ka research kung okay lang mag face-to-face. Nasa kung mahal gasolina, sir. Pwede na lang kita din mag face-to-face.
True.
True, ma'am.
Laboratory. So, collaborate man kami laboratory into research. This is the best time nga mag-online class kasi mahal at gusto gasolina. Kasi na Sir Joe, okay, sige. Next na lakita nga, next na lakita nga school year. Okay.
Bawi na lang, ma'am, next life.
Very next life is, did tapos naman ka mo next school year, ano. So, hopefully matapos ka mo. So, next school year, hope face-to-face na katanan. Ang mabubunat gasolina. O sige, hala. Thank you for participating and have a good day.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Happy lunch.
Bye-bye. Happy lunch.